any of the other systems of the game whatsoever. How you level up, how you would manage inventory, how fights would actually go. All I had was a slice of what combat looked like. And I put way too much work into that before realizing that the game couldn't work like that fundamentally. So I ended up having to switch it up. Thank you. I ended up having to switch it up. And I realized this isn't even worth trying to salvage, that I just didn't plan well enough to finish this, to make it a concise, polished game. So.
And this matters a lot when you're starting, because when you're learning new things as you're starting off, a lot of times at the beginning you don't know how to lay that foundation, even if you know what you want to end up doing, because you don't know what you don't know. So once you learn that stuff, you can kind of treat it as a learning experience and use that knowledge to lay a better foundation in the future, which I think kind of applied to your game too, because you were doing that in high school.
Yep.
And lastly, if you have too much going on at once, make sure to, if you pick up a job and you are working on class projects all the time, and for the foreseeable future, like even 2 years down the line, you don't see yourself having the spare time to do this, don't leave your teammates dragging. Don't do that. Let them know, guys, I just don't have time to do this. There's too much going on for me. But you can still maintain that idea, and if you write it down, you can come back to it years later and keep going off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be an entirely new project, because who knows what it looks like when you look at your three years old game that you barely started. But
next point is, if your game just doesn't work, if you find out that your game is just inherently bad and not fun to play, it might be time to just chop it and just drop it and work on something else. Case in point, E.T. for the Atari. If you've heard of this, it's known as the worst game in video game history. If your game is just not fun, if it just doesn't make sense, drop it, get rid of it. Like if it's fundamentally broken, there's no point in trying to, revive it.
you say that. Depends what your the goal of making your game is, though.
That's right. If you're making,
is entirely just to learn how to make a game, and you aren't caring like who sees it, you aren't caring who enjoys it necessarily, or that's the side objective. It's not a big deal to have a bad game, as long as you are still getting that learning experience that you're looking for. But if you aren't getting that learning experience and it's a bad game, then maybe it's not worth your time.
Yeah, if you're trying to publish something to make some money and it's just not good. Or if you're Bennett Foddy and you're making Getting Over It, then your game is bad and people will buy it. So, I mean, honestly, what do we know? So,
if your game is QWOP, please sell it.
Couple more. So, Sam kind of touched on this, that if your game is at the point where the time it takes to fix the problems is literally more than the time it would take to just redo it and build it when you have a better idea of how it needs to work in the end, drop it and restart it. We say can your game, you can totally restart it instantly and build it back up from there. So sometimes you just need to look at something and say, this is out of my control, this is not going to be usable, and I'm going to put more effort trying to fix this than it would be to just build it again better. Yeah.
Sometimes if you can an idea and start from scratch, it'll actually be easier the second time to do, because you've already done it once and you've gotten to a point where you understand it and how you could have done it better.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, sometimes it's good to take a break, because I know when I work on something and then realize I need to restart, and I just did what I did for the last 2 weeks, it's kind of hard to go back and just say, all right, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did the last 2 weeks and start from square zero. Maybe it's good to take one of those other ideas in your head and start working on that instead, and then you can come back when you refuel your passion for making that original game and kind of go back and forth between stuff.
So did anybody hear about the recent news of Metroid Prime 4? Did you guys hear about Nintendo's announcement about that? It was really interesting, and I'm actually super happy that they did it because it was a very transparent moment of game developers talking to the fans, where basically they said that they were working on the game and they realized it just wasn't up to their standard and they weren't happy with it. So they decided to stop working on that, completely can everything they'd done, and then collaborate with the people who made the original Metroid Prime, and then completely restarting it from them. And so they came out with an announcement saying we're going to be way behind on schedule because we're dropping so much progress, but we think this will be better in the long run. Sometimes you just need to do that. Almost no fans of the Metroid Prime games were disappointed. Most of them were happy. Sometimes just because you're dropping a project and you have to restart it and try and redo it doesn't mean people are going to be upset, because that means it's probably going to be a better game in the end. That's a good thing. So I thought that was a really cool moment of developers, being super transparent with people and just saying, hey, it wasn't working, we're restarting, it'll be better this way.
This isn't a single person either. This is Nintendo.
It's a full team.
We're gonna scrap this idea that tens of, I don't know how many people work on a game like Metroid. For a lot of people are working on that and being paid salaries, and they just said, all right, this isn't what our fans want, so we're gonna make something different. We're gonna make that make what we think Metroid Prime 4 should be.
Final point, if your vision is just lost, if you realize that what you are currently making is not what you set out to do and not what you have written down and not your idea, that's a good time to just chop it and maybe try going back at it. I know that there was I think the System Shock, there was going to be a System Shock remaster that was funded on Kickstarter, I believe. Or maybe it wasn't System. No, it wasn't that. I'm lying to you right now through my teeth. No, there's another game. I don't know the title of it. This is a really bad example because I don't even know the title of it. But they were making a game, and they were making not a remake, but sort of a spiritual successor. Soul. Okay, the fact that you knew what I was talking about, thank you. Goodness. They were making a spiritual successor of an older game, and it was the single-player RPG strategy game. And as they were developing it, they kept adding different things to the point where they were adding multiplayer, and they were making it PvP, and then they were focusing it around multiplayer PvP. And they realized that the game had just not gone in the direction that they wanted. That this game that they had an idea for, this game that people paid for, was not what they were making. So they had to stop, and they had to completely, trash their progress, and they had to restart. And sometimes if it's just not going in the direction you want, if the vision is gone, stop. I mean, if it's not the game you set out to make, and you're fine, and you're not okay with that, I guess. I mean, sometimes you make a game.
Sometimes you realize that you develop ideas as you go on and make a game. I know Braid, they actually developed or came up with ideas for the moveset as he made the game. That's part of changing your vision, but being okay with it. But if you have a vision and then you realize that you're spending all your time worrying about microtransactions and making sure that all works, and your game isn't actually what you want it to be, that's when you want to take a step back and say, all right, is this really what I want to make, or should I can it and start something else, or start it over again with a better idea of where to go?
So I wanted to take this time to show an example of a game I made in high school that was something else. It was called 8-Bit Whiz. And you play as a wizard and you fight. And I've mentioned this before, that this was the game that has cooldowns on your movement. I've mentioned that as a really bad example of game design, that it felt like garbage to play. Would anyone like to play it, first of all? Because it's really hard. Sure, come on up. I think you've played it before, so.
That's right. Yeah.
It's something, that's for sure. Let's see if the resolution is fine. So it should be very obvious that it's in development, because the controls are squished in the top, all listed one after another. So, and there's no explanations whatsoever, but
Oh wait, but the art is on point.
the art, I'm proud of that.
Yeah,
I liked the art, but the what?
I forgot about the caves in the background.
Yeah.
This is a different version than shown before.
Yeah, he's shown this and then the first demo.
I showed the very beginning when you could walk into the background and just disappear. So, yeah, the movement having a cooldown is not great because you have to duck in to attack them, and then to get back out, sometimes you just can't do it quickly enough. But this project I would definitely consider was a success, but it was written with absolute spaghetti code, and this was the game I mentioned that I did not plan for other parts of combat. Was that did he use the glitchy thing? I don't know why that happened. That's never happened before, and it happened earlier today, so that's just a treat that we get. You killed one, I'm impressed. This is, a lot of people die in this.
In the first and final level.
Because the enemies have an advantage where what I used was, this is really bad game design, they just had a random value that said how quickly they could attack. So if it was just a really low value multiple times in a row, they'd just machine gun you to death. And then other times they would just have super long breaks before doing stuff. You have a shield that I think pretty much nobody notices because, again, it's squished up into the top. But yeah, and then so what I did with it was I actually tried to do something new. So let me jump in here real quick. I tried to switch things up. I did this, I don't remember how recently, but I made a new version of it where you can play this one too. It's not very different, but it feels much better to play. So pick a different one. So what I did with this was mostly for testing purposes to see how good it would feel. I made it so movement has no cooldown, so you can move as fast as you want. I made it so you can shoot the basic shot as fast as you want. And I made it so mana just basically stayed near the top, so it was much easier to test. But even with changing this stuff, even with doing things that I thought, yes, this will make an ultimately better experience, it still didn't have the things that I needed. It still wasn't planned with full combat ready to go. It was inherently broken. So I'm not going to continue this version of this project. This is a game that I want to continue, that I am planning on continuing, but I am not going to be using this 4 years ago me, very little experience with Unity version of this, and try and deal with that spaghetti code. And that's okay. You know, if you have a project that's not working, you drop it and you learn from it. You figure out what you can do different. You realize what went right, what went wrong, all of it.
I think this is also a case of scope too big, considering how much you had in store for this game.
And putting way too much effort in the artwork before realizing the game didn't even work.
You do all the art yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. This was like the artwork was like a semester of
You must paint.
Of a class.
yes, of a lot
Class
of
where he just got to sit there and work on this game.
yeah. I took a game dev course that they had a game dev course that had 2 hours a day, the class, and there was no homework and there was nothing due at the end of the semester. You just had to have something to show.
That was in high school.
It was amazing. I made this. It was great.
I was a senior in high school. I made a Donald Trump app. Just like.
But yeah, I mean, planning on coming back to it. Just because it knocked me down doesn't mean I'm going to stay down. You know,
What?
you bounce back.
What's this though?
Oh my God, you found the debug button. Forgot about it. There was supposed to be a beam at some point. That was supposed to be like the fire beam.
Because I'm just like, these controls are weird. You get QW up here, and then F, then basic attack down here. Just like, what does
Then
this
there's
do?
E, and then that just okay. I don't think it does damage. It might. I'm not sure. Either way, you know, you adjust. Thank you.
So what's the biggest thing you learned from this game?
So, a lot of things. First of all, don't have 48 instance variables at the top of a class.
So this is why you're not continuing this game.
All of my artwork was stored as instance variables at the top of the classes they were attached to. It was horrible. It was a nightmare. So yeah, a lot of programming things. Also, you had 2 health. My God, that was pretty close. Yeah, I learned a lot of stuff with just general programming and using Unity. I learned a lot of time management about why gray boxing is important, so you don't waste all your time making something look pretty without giving it good substance. And honestly, I learned where to take this game, and I learned that I don't want to take it in pretty much every way that's listed here other than the fact that you can move from square to square. That's probably the only thing that's going to be salvaged other than the general idea behind it. So there were a lot of things I got from it.
What are you gonna do with it now? What's the plan?
Plan is, the scope has gotten pretty big, so I'm not planning on working on it anytime soon. I've got other stuff in the works that I'm working on. I've got that VR game and a mobile app and whatnot.
Reversing.
Yeah, and the game dev course that I'm in right now. But I've been writing a lot in my game dev notebook and just coming up with a ton of ideas and trying to refine the idea as much as I can to what I want. So I've kind of just been going through a lot of planning iterations because I really want this game to be good, but I don't want to do that again. I don't want to put a ton of work into it and then realize, yeah, this isn't really going to go anywhere.
I will say though, it's okay to do different like iterations of your game. There's just a lot of games out there where it's like, oh, this is, you know, Worms Reloaded Armageddon or something. It's some long name that you know it's like the 4th iteration of it or something. Well, if you look back at the first iteration of some of those games, it looks something like that. It's not very pretty. It's just like them getting something out there, and then they realized, they're like, that's just them finishing it, and then coming back to it and saying, I want to do a second version of this. Have any of you guys played Creeper World? It's like a Flash game. It's now a Flash game that I like always played on different like
School computers.
Yeah, school computers, stuff like that. I played the 3rd version of it, and it was pretty dumbed down already. And that's that 3rd version of it. Now they're coming out with a 4th version that they're selling on Steam for like $20. It's like they just keep building off of what they've learned on the previous ones and making it better for future stuff. And I think that's one way to do it, if that works towards you to do that iteratively.
So, what do you do with a game that you've decided to chop? That you decided to can, you've decided to trash, you've decided to throw away, however you want to word it. So, first of all, learn from it. And the very first thing that you need to know about this is do not delete anything. I could not show you that version of the game if I deleted it, which I've been tempted to many times because I still don't like it much, a lot of things about it. I have a whole archive of old versions of old games that I ended up not finishing and that I ended up not being interested or realizing wouldn't work. Don't delete your projects because you can always come back and learn from them. It's good to look at them retrospectively and think, okay, why would I do something like this? Why did I do something like this? How can I not do something bad? How can I take something good from it? All that kind of stuff. And it's not stealing if it's your own stuff. You can always take art, always can take code from old projects. Can't do that if they're gone, so definitely don't delete anything. That's important.
You want to also make sure you can write this down, or you can just think about it, but depending on how large of a scale, it might be smart to write this stuff down so you remember it when you come back, if you want to come back. But think about, what did you learn when you made this game? We asked Jake what he learned making 8-Bit Whiz. There was a lot of stuff, and I'm sure he barely scratched the surface of what he learned. There's a lot of stuff you can learn at this point in our careers, our game development. think about what went right and what went wrong. So, like you said, a lot went wrong with that, and some went right. The artwork seemed to go right.
Artwork was nice. The idea of the 9 squares paid off. I'm probably going to use that for the final version of the game. I like that concept, you know. There's a few things.
Also ask yourself why that happened. Because if you ask yourself why things went right, why things went wrong, it kind of gives you the idea of the process that went on making your game, and what part of that process do you want to keep? What part of that process do you want to change? You don't want to continue to do the same mistakes that you've already made. If you're going to be scrapping a game, you should learn from it and make the next one better. That's what you're supposed to. That's kind of the point of doing it. So we have, and then I have my game to show that I scrapped. I might come back to this too. Ooh.
So another one over
Which one do you want?
I'm sure that won't destroy any of that. I just talked about not deleting stuff and I just yanked my...
My other flash drive didn't work today, so worried that one's broken. I was gonna put it on this. Not I'm gonna window this because I don't think I have another way to exit out of it. So this isn't quite all that went into this game, but this is all that you see when you build it. The idea of this game was to be kind of a Mega Man game where each level you beat, you unlock a new color, and different colors have different abilities and whatnot, and you could see that color on yourself. And I was this summer just wanting to make a tutorial one where you just face brown guys, so you don't really have colors yet. And to start this off, I decided to make a map generator, which you can see the map that was generated by it. What I did was I made the map, or I made the program read an image, just a pixel by pixel image, and see whether or not the image or the pixels were black, gray, or blue. So the blue would spawn a player, the gray it would spawn a floor, and the black would spawn a wall. And by doing that, I got a really cool thing where I could make maps very quickly, and it worked with a bunch of different stuff. But at the same time, I realized that I was starting my internship and I did not have time to continue working on this. And I also worked on a game with my brother over the summer, so trying to do that in addition to this, in addition to work, was just too much for me. And it was a game that has a pretty big scope to it, kind of similar to yours. And even though I was only trying to do the tutorial part of it, even that was a pretty big scope in my mind. So I decided it was best to just set it down. I have something that I can take with me. I can use this code in the next version of the game or in a different game if I want to easily create maps. It's really easy to pull that stuff out, but this way I didn't put a bunch more work in that and end up with an unfinished game that I knew in advance I would have to scrap or not be able to even look at it for at least a few years. So this way it was a much better way to do that.
Yeah, you clicked. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So what would you say you learned from it?
What did I say I learned from it? I learned that I think I had that same problem we had with Monogame, where the pixels don't all technical details. I learned how to be able to generate maps like that, and that a lot of times you can plan for something to take, maybe a day to do, and then realize that it actually takes 1 or 2 weeks to do because of all the little bugs or all the unexpected things that come up into it. And then if you are busy on top of that, it just adds so much more. Instead of 1 week, it might take 2 months, and that that little thing that you planned on is hard to keep going off of, but if you just keep doing it and get to the point, I thought I did a good job with this. I first planned doing what I knew would be most valuable, even if I didn't continue this game, because this is something I can take out, rather than starting off just by building a level without this. That's not really something I can take out of this. I wouldn't be able to take that out and continue building off of it like I could with this. So I think there was some things that I had learned in previous games that I applied even in setting up this one, and I thought that went well and would do that again if I made another game.
Nate, did you want to show one of yours?
Sure, yeah. Actually, so, yeah, I'll show full screen. So about, not this past summer, but summer before, I was fearing that I'd probably be leading most of the workshops. So I was like, I want to learn some Unity. So then I think I came up with this idea like during the school year. But the idea was you have a hexagon grid, kind of like if you've played Catan before. In Catan, you build roads on the edges of hexagons. So what I was going to do is you can, it's almost kind of like the road simulator for that, but you build streams along the sides of hexagons, and I'll start from this one. Yes. So you grab the stream and go along the edges, and there's elevation, and then these little village guys pop up. And you can go through and cut off the river at the head or stuff like that. You can also reattach it. That didn't actually work. Another reason why, actually the reason why I canned it, as you can see, this is the entire map. Also did the art for this as one of the first things I did. I actually didn't get all the art implemented at this point. Strange. But the reason why I canned it is because, actually I should have shown you guys the other map. That map in itself wasn't too hard to make, but I was like, okay, I could do that. Let's make a bigger map. So I can't zoom out further. That's interesting. So I went basically as big as I think I could possibly go, but it turned into this big unit. I was taking in a text file and converting it to a map. So I personally went through and put every single number in this entire text document. And the reason why I stopped was because I didn't want to do that to make a game. It's super hard to bug test. This is why I'm so happy to hear that you can make.
Have you tried drawing it as an image?
Yeah. I wish I could just take this into, what's wrong?
It's reading too many numbers.
Yeah, it's reading too many numbers. But you can't visualize what this will actually make. In going through this, I had like a 5-step process of drawing a map, then typing each one individually. It was horrendous. That's why I only made one of these big guys. But the final nail in the coffin was I wanted it to be a level that stepped step by step. So up until you get 5 villages on the map, you're going and they only spawn in one point, then they move to another part, so you have to keep moving. That's what all these lines are. And these were even worse because I had to read in, where is it? This guy. It's hard to read, but I had letter codes for all this stuff. I was basically doing more work than I needed to at this point. And so one of the great things that I say about games is once you have the core concept and the core code set behind it, you can make as many maps as you want for it. I got through all the fun programming of this, and then when it came point to the reward section where I could just make map upon map upon map, it just wasn't fun at that point. So at this point, I canned it. If I went back to make an image drawing software, that would have been a whole bunch easier, and you can almost see the outline of this map in here. Oh boy, why did I delete that? Yeah, don't delete anything.
Yeah, it's like a circle.
Yeah, you can kind of
Ish.
see it. But one of the good things that came from this is I'm in 309 right now, and our group is doing about the same thing. We're going to be using my code, just copied and pasted that in for reading out of a text document, except for in this game, I was hand writing each of the levels. In our game, we will allow you to create it in-game. So you can click on a tile, and it'll add that to your map. So the next step for this game would either be making it an art assets program or having an in-game creator. There can be these really difficult things to make by hand, but if you make something in-game to make it for you, generate this stuff, it goes a lot easier.
I was gonna say, this wouldn't be bad if you had
No.
it randomly generated or generated by code, but
Yeah.
if you're handwriting that, God save you.
Oh.
Yeah, this is a great way to save things. This is a great way to
Yeah.
save your map, not a great way to make your map.
This will probably be the last map, this small guy, that we actually make by hand, because next step is actually making that generator. So I learned how to read and write from a file. I learned how not to read and write from a file, and learned that if you go at it from the start, making an in-game map maker, you'll save yourself from this horror. And, yeah.
What do you think went well? in the game?
I learned Blender, actually. Just basic stuff that I have since forgot, but like
Does it say game over or game ever?
game over. I tried making a cool font.
It's cool. It's a cool font.
Yeah.
The O just kind of looks like a E a little bit, just a little bit, just.
So like all these guys are actually rotated the same. Each of the colors has its own art asset, which was really awesome. I learned what matte materials were, which is why all these things look really soft and glossy. Soft and glossy, those are two different things, sorry. But yeah, I like how the art of it looks, and I even have the title here. But yeah, definitely would have done it a different way.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's a lot of different games that even we have made, and I'm sure some of you guys have made games that you've decided to leave by the wayside. Some of them have made it further than others before you realize that you need to scrap it, or you realize your scope's too big, or maybe future version of yourself could come back and salvage something from it, but at the moment, that's all you can do. And that's okay, because it's game development, and learning how to develop in itself is an iterative process. You need to keep coming at it, especially when a lot of us are just starting off with less than a couple years of experience. It's very important to keep getting at it and working at it, because you're going to be learning something new every single time you work on something. And maybe next time it won't be, or you'll have the knowledge to make it what you want it to be.
Yep. Not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You got this.
Yeah. Well, actually, do you want to talk about the workshop?
Yes. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. So reminder, there's a workshop this weekend that I'll be leading about designing enemy behavior. So in video games, we've gone over movement of your player and a bunch of stuff like that, but we haven't really gone over what enemies do. So this is the first part, I guess, kind of a two-part workshop, where the first workshop we're going to be talking about really basic enemy behaviors, stuff like handling line of sight, maybe a little bit of pathfinding, just sort of the basics of that. And then the week after that, we'd like to talk about AI, designing your enemies to do things that make them seem smart or making them not seem too smart, as can be kind of difficult when designing AI. So we'll be talking about that. So check that out if you're interested. Should be fun. Should be really interesting.
Yep. If you have a game or concept that you want to show, if you want to show your failed games, feel free to come on up and show people what you've done, what you've learned from it, what you want to do. Look for other people that are interested in working on something with you. It'd be great to hear what you have. Also, if you want a shirt or pay dues, be sure to do that sooner rather than later.
Yep.
You guys already kind of know that. And go forth, make games, and be awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe. It's not nice outside.